Yeah? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning for the Mississippi Sound Coalition's press conference. I am LaShondra McCarty, and I will be moderating this morning. And the first person that you will hear from other than myself is of the Sound Coalition.
Thank you, LaShondra. I do want to recognize some representatives of the named plaintiffs of the lawsuit we're going to tell you about that are here today. Linda Hornsby, the Executive Director of the Mississippi Hotel and Lodging Association, is here, and Ryan Bradley, who is the Executive Director of the Mississippi County, who's the first named plaintiff in this case. County, who's the first named plaintiff in this case. Mayor Rusty Quave of D'Iberville, I think the longest serving mayor on the coast. Where's Rusty? There you are, Rusty Quave, and Bobby Weaver, who's the city manager from D'Iberville as well, and Mayor Jimmy Rafferty from Pashtun, Mayor Rafferty, and Mayor Gillis had a scheduling conflict, but Biloxi is well represented here today. So those are the 6 plaintiffs you'll hear more about from Robert Weigel. Let me just, before we introduce Robert, just a couple of moments here to emphasize to you that the Mississippi Sound, our way of life really, and our whole economy are in grave danger. The Bonnet Carré Spillway is killing our dolphins and other marine life. Scientists have referred to the bottlenose dolphin as a sentinel of the health of the whole marine ecosystem. So the dolphins are telling us something. We must listen to the dolphins. We must act on these warning signs, and we must protect our dolphins. This is their home. Now we must protect the Mississippi Sound estuary for the economy and the way of life that we experience. It's our home too, and it's at risk, it's at danger. So we must defend it. We have a message for the Corps today, basically, and it is, we will not take no for an answer. So I'm going to turn this over to Robert Weigel to explain to you what we've filed this morning. Robert.
Certainly. Thank you, Gerald. My name is Robert Weigel. I have the honor of representing the coalition in this lawsuit, and the message that I have today is very short, and it's very simple. We have a federal statute, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and it prohibits the killing, the harassment of marine mammals like the bottlenose dolphin, if it's expected, even if it's unintentional. Now, on the one hand, the Corps of Engineers has a lot of technical, legal arguments why they don't need to do anything different in operating Bonnet Carré Spillway to protect our Mississippi Sound and our bottlenose dolphins and everything that depends on the Mississippi Sound. On the other hand, I have a lot of dead dolphins. Now, you can decide which side of that you come down on. I'll tell you which side I come down on. I come down on the side of trying to make a difference. And when we protect those dolphins, we're going to protect the fishermen that I see out here today. We're going to protect our tourism businesses that we see today. We're going to protect our local governments and all our taxpayers. All right, that's what we want to do. And make no mistake, I think I can speak for Supervisor. These folks want is a cooperative process with the Corps of Engineers to use the science and use the data to protect all of us. We haven't gotten that so far. And as Gerald said, we're not going to take no for an answer.
The next person that we have coming to the podium is Dr. Moby Salungi. He is the chair of the Coalition's Science Committee. I do ask that you will hold your questions for him until after he is complete. Thank you, Dr. Moby Solangi.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I think I know quite a few of you, and I really appreciate all of you coming here to listen and help support what we are trying to do. And I'm, like I said, I work with Gerald Blessey and all the other mayors in this part that are attending, in making them understand what is in the 70s. Got my PhD in marine biology, studied the effect of crude oil on fishes, and so that we could have a plan to address any oil spill issues. And then I got into marine mammals. Why did I get into marine mammals? This was a species that was not very well studied, but we had the largest dolphin population. It was interesting to see why, and very little was scientifically known about it. So marine life was, of course, an attraction, and it gave me the opportunity to learn. And I found out that these animals being on top of the ocean, good biological indicator of the environment, and it's basically what the coal miner, the canary, and I was speaking with Elaine, indicating to her that the coal miners, when went into a mine, they would have one person holding a canary in a little cage, and they would watch it. If it went down, they knew the next person's would be the coal miners, and he would blow the whistle, and everybody would run. Well, because we are next. What's the issue? How do you problem that we have? For Mexico, but in that process, they bring in the agriculture, industrial, and sewage waste. And for us to think that this is just typical fresh water, it's not fresh water, it's very polluted water. It's one of the most polluted rivers. But what has happened over time, that man has gone in and changed the directions of the river and its use. And in that process, when that water, polluted water, goes and hits the Gulf, it ends up into what we call a dead zone. And the picture on the right-hand side on the bottom corner shows you that it can be as big as 10,000 square miles. That means nothing can live in it and die. That has caused a serious problem. The other thing that people in Mississippi have never recognized, that the Mississippi River is not connected to Mississippi. That water doesn't come into Mississippi Sound. The only way it can come into the Mississippi Sound is when it is diverted. And one of the biggest ways it is diverted is through the Bonnie Carey Spillway. Now, this is, and again, Gerald just gave me a few minutes, so I'm going to try to quickly go through this. This grayish color represents that it is kind of saline, semi-saline water. But as it opened up in February and March, the lighter color gives you an indication how drastically it changed. And we're not talking about just trickles of water. Yes, we have our little rivers, the Pascagoula, the Pearls, and others. They make that into an estuary. But the problem is these large quantities of water. Now, if you look at this, this is a kind of a focus thing. A few weeks later, after it is fully blown open, the entire Lake Pontchartrain, through which the Bonnie Carey Spillway, which is right here, I knew they told me not to. The Lake Pontchartrain drains through the Wrigley's and comes into the Mississippi Sound. This influx at such a rapid, start seeing changes with the oysters and the shrimp and so on and so forth. We also start seeing salinity yellow. And our biggest problem is that the Mississippi Sound and its adjacent waters are a cul-de-sac. You don't see a lot of exchange as you would see on the mouth of the river, where the Gulf has 7, 8 fresh polluted water coming from the Mississippi River, coming into now the Mississippi Sound. Now, this water, some of it is very toxic. So as you have probably heard in news that, you know, we had beach closures, we had shrimp die-offs, we had all sorts of oysters and other organisms being affected, but it also affected the economy. With beach closures, people stopped coming. I'm sure there are folks that can talk about that in detail. We had started seeing dead dolphins. We had advisories, people having rashes and diarrhea, vomiting, so all sorts of things. But very large number of animals died. Facts speak louder than words. I've been doing this for 40 years, really spent a lot of time studying what was happening with the dolphins. So in 2010, during the BP oil spill, you can see that with so many people looking for dead animals or sick or injured animals, we had 91 dolphins and 309 sea turtles. Now keep in mind the 309 sea turtles, majority of them were the Kemp's Ridley, which is the most endangered species in the world. This is their habitat. And you started seeing that. But what happens next? In 2011, they open up the spillway. More dolphins in 2011 than during the BP oil spill. And many of these animals had skin lesions and others, but all blamed it. The Corps of Engineers and everybody else blamed them on, well, this is the after effect of the oil spill. So that got put under the rug. But then when the Bonnie Carey is open 2012, 13, 14, 15, you start seeing a normal trend. Animals do die, we understand that. But it's the type of death that is really indicative of what may be going on with, specifically with the water coming through the Bonnie Carey. 82 dolphins die. 10 trillion gallons of water that came in. We had 153 dolphins and 201 sea turtles that died. And the thing was, the numbers, of course, speak for themselves. We again had it in 2020, and we started seeing that. But that isn't what was really a conclusive evidence of what may be happening because of the Bonnie Carey. Well, what happens is when the fresh polluted water comes in, changes the salinity, makes it into less salt. These animals live in salt water. They move in and out. The estuarine environment is, of course, in flux, but it's not as 0 or 2 or 3 parts per thousand. This animal was alive when we went to pick it up. And you can see the sores on the body of this animal. Well, people say, well, these animals can move. No, they don't. This is their home. This is where they were born. The Mississippi Sound is a nursery. This is where the young ones are born. This is where they live. You can't, it's very common with other species of animals that they become territorial. So before they realize they're sick, these sores open up for viruses and bacteria to go into them, and then the animal eventually dies. A very Bonnie Carey spillway that came into the Mississippi Sound that actually killed these animals. That by monitoring these animals in the wild, we are able to then determine, is there reasons for these animals to continue to suffer. Now, once you destroy the ecosystem, it's like having a hurricane. When a hurricane comes in, it took 2 years after Katrina to clean it up. The sun is shining that Katrina is gone, but the devastation took years, and some of it still hasn't been done. The same thing happens with an underwater hurricane. We have destroyed the ecosystem now. It takes years for the oysters to come back, shrimp to develop. These are long-lived species. These animals are now starving. You can see ribs on the animals with malnutrition. You can see still animals that are inhabiting the western part of the Sound with lesions on them. We have baby dolphins that are born with skin lesions showing up. And so these are indications that even after the Bonnie Carey spillway is closed, we still start seeing the after effects. And so in a nutshell, I've been monitoring my time. My manager is looking at me. But the Mississippi River, like I said, it's very highly polluted. It's not indigenous and connected to the Mississippi Sound. And so when you have water that's not indigenous to our area and suddenly you have an influx, you are definitely going to see a change in the ecosystem. And these things will continue. Mark my words, and this will cause very serious long-term damage to the ecosystem. It'll result in the losses to the marine mammals, fisheries, and the economy. So even after you've closed it, by the way, I don't know if very people know about this, that even when the Bonnie Carey is closed, it leaks. You're still getting 5,000 CFS that is coming through the Bonnie Carey. Of course, this influx and the change in the ecosystem affecting the health of the animals is contrary to the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It affects sea turtles, which is, again, contrary to the Endangered Species Act. The Mississippi Sound is a nursery, and of course, in legal terms, it's called essential fish habitat instead of calling it a nursery. Well, when the nursery dies, where are you going to get the babies? So it's like killing the goose that is laying the golden egg. You're not going to find the golden egg no matter where you go if you kill the goose. Again, an independent and a complete environmental impact statement should be done. The Mississippi operation has to keep that in mind as to the effect on what it has on both the ecosystem and what these new diversions are going to have on us. The Army Corps has the authority to manage it. I understand that they have to save property and humans, but I think there are ways that they can also work with not only how they control the flood, but how they can save the fisheries and the ecosystem and our livelihoods. So that's essentially what I have to give you in a nutshell of our 40 years of study of these dolphins. I think this is a very serious issue, and I'm glad that some action is being taken.
Stay here. We're going to answer some questions. Sure. Step over here, Moby.
Does anyone have any questions? Either from the press or the audience? Hold on one moment. Because we have some people streaming, we're going to have you grab the mic.
Rusty Quave with the City of D'Iberville. When will an environmental impact study possibly be done? And what would be the time frame of a study?
I'm going to ask Robert Weigel to answer the question from a more technical standpoint. Right now, the Corps that they understand is a mandate to do an environmental impact statement. So, Robert, let me yield to you about how we make that happen.
Sure. Let me tell you, there are two different venues here. Now, one thing that's going on right now, because we already won a lawsuit that says that the Corps has to consult with the National Marine Fisheries Service about their impacts on essential fish habitat, which is the entire Mississippi Sound. Okay, there's that. Under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, if they want that, it's harming bottlenose dolphin, they need to get an incidental take permit, is what it's called. That's also from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and that is the process that looks at ways to minimize impacts. So it's very similar to that. And then there's a third thing that's going on, which is a comprehensive study of the lower Mississippi River, and thanks to our congressional delegation and our senators, the Mississippi Sound Coalition has become a party of interest in that as well, and that's going to be looking at all these issues. So you have several different venues where that process is going to be happening. So that helps.
Mr. Blessy, my only problem with an environmental impact study, it could take 4 years to get an answer. We've already studied the Gulf of Mexico so many times that the data is out there, like Moby and his crew can get together and put this together. We'd have a quick result on what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico. One other thing is I'm hearing through the rumors that the Corps of Engineers doesn't want to take the heat away other than the Corps of Engineers. There's nobody.
Corps of Engineers.
Away other than the Corps of Engineers. There's nobody.
Corps of Engineers controls it, and you know, I have two things to say about what you just said. Yes, we do. We need action now. That's why we filed this lawsuit this morning. But is it going to take some time? Yes, it's going to take some time. We can't fix a problem that took 100 years to make in 100 days. But we've got to start somewhere, and we're going to push it as hard as we can.
Let me add something, Anita, just to be clear, because Mayor Quave has really raised the essential problem out there. The Lower Mississippi Comprehensive Management Study that our congressional delegation and our senators have given $25 million to the Corps to do is not an EIS per se. It is a study, and they'll have to report back to Congress. The value of an EIS is that under the National Environmental Protection Act, if it's flawed, then a citizen can bring that to court. The reason we tried that, one goal is to find win-win solutions, to work with Louisiana and the Corps of Engineers and the federal government. Brought on board recently the Northern Gulf Institute, a collaboration of scientists at Mississippi State and University of Southern Mississippi, and we brought on an engineering group, Brown and Mitchell, and we brought on an economic impact group from Mississippi State, all of which to present data to that Lower Mississippi study. We agree with you. We shouldn't wait 5 years for that study to be finished. There is plenty of evidence already. Let's get with it and let's focus on that and see if we can find win-win solutions. I mean, the fisheries in Louisiana are suffering just like we are. We have in our audience today George Ricks, who's the former president of the Save Louisiana Coalition. So we know that we have a common interest with Louisiana. And of course, everyone wants to protect New Orleans from flooding. We're for that, but there's a way to win-win. We can walk and chew gum. I mean, it's possible. Let's start taking the actions you can take now. For instance, consider opening the Morganza Spillway at the same time you open the Bonnie Carey.
Support what has already been said. The way Louisiana was able to get through the system, they asked Congress in the middle of the night to give them a waiver to kill the dolphins in Louisiana. They never really got a waiver to kill the dolphins in Mississippi. So for their Mid-Barataria diversion and other diversions, they indicated that none of this water is going to go and affect Mississippi. So they modified and got a waiver so that the Marine Mammal Protection Act would not be applicable to them and they could kill whatever they want to. And the studies have shown that when the Mid-Barataria diversion is open, all the dolphins within a few years will become extinct in Barataria Bay. But not only the dolphins, the entire ecosystem. The oysters will be gone, the shrimp will be gone. Like I said, the whole nursery will be gone. But they were able to do so because to show that what the impacts are going to be. And our congressional delegation has been outstanding. I think everybody has met Murtis, and I know we've got several other folks that have understood this issue and have been indicating to our congressional folks, this is going to take some congressional action. But the Marine Mammal Protection Act really protects our state. I have another question.
Anita.
Yes, Anita Lee from the Sun Herald. Just a quick clarification and then a question. On the 153 dolphins that died in 2019, were those found on Mississippi shores, or where were those dolphins located?
Yes, these were from Mississippi. And of course, the total number of deaths were by National Marine Fisheries Service was about 300, which included those from Louisiana and our neighboring states of Alabama. But my stranding coordinator is right here, so I wanted to make sure. And quite a large number of these animals had these skin lesions. And of course, we have been looking at pollutants that may have gone through the food chain into these animals.
The other question was, for the attorneys, were you all encouraged to file this by the ruling in the previous case? And how would you characterize what the Corps has done in response to Judge Girola's orders in the other case that's pending?
Yeah. So, the correct way to put this, we look at every lawsuit on its own merits. This coalition's been very clear to me. We're only going to file things that have a sound basis in fact and in law. So we look at each one on its own merits. Yes, is it encouraging? National Marine Fisheries Service, we have looked at what the Corps supplied to the National Marine Fisheries Service, and unfortunately, really what that says is that the Bonnie Carey Spillway doesn't have any significant impacts on the Mississippi Sound. And of course, we have responded to that with the science and the data that we have that shows that that's simply not a sustainable position.
Robert, could you elaborate a little bit more on the specifics of what this lawsuit is and how it differs from what, the prior lawsuit and what has been filed?
Yeah, as I was saying before, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, if you're going to take acts that, this is simplifying somewhat, but if you're going to take acts that harm marine mammals, not necessarily kill them, but also cause them distress, reproductive failure, alter their essential habits, and things like that, you have to go through a process with the National Oceanics and Atmospheric Administration that gets you what's called an incidental take permit. And what's important about that is that you have to go through a process there to try to figure out how to not have those bad impacts, right? So if you're talking about opening the Bonnie Carey Spillway and releasing a huge flood of water into the Mississippi Sound that's going to dump that salinity down to the point that it affects the dolphins, well, then you look and say, okay, how could we do that differently, right? How could we change the Mississippi? That's what's important about that process, and that is what we're asking to have the Corps go through here, right? This is the most, it's hard to get across how common sense this process is, right? If you want to get to your destination, you've got to set your foot out the door and start on the journey. And that's what we need to get the Corps to do here, is to just start on that journey. Let's just start looking for ways that we can mitigate those impacts. And we've got some of the best scientists in the country that are working on ways to do that right now. But we got to get the Corps to pay attention.
Hey, Joe Spraggins with the Department of Marine Resources. When you're looking at this, are y'all looking at anything and as far as the two other diversions that they're looking at north of the Bonnie Carey, one being the Alma, one being the Union diversion, and the issue there as to whether or not that could do something that would alleviate, because according to what we're seeing with that, and this was done by a Louisiana State University study, and but it was a study to say that if you open the west, and the Alma would open when it reaches 1 million cubic feet per second, and that's on the river when it reaches that, which is just north of the Bonnie Carey, and which would allow 50,000 cubic feet per second to go into a forest into the west side, and which would divert. Then if it got to one point, you can tell them you got to open up the Morganza's another. Is there another way to look at this? And that's what I'm asking. I know we are doing studies. We did the study on the Mid-Britain, and we found out what that would do. And I tell you what, it wasn't good.
Mechanisms that we can use. But, General Spraggins, what we got to do, we got to get the Corps to put that first foot out the door and say, yes, let's do that.
I understand that, and I'm just asking, though, that, maybe we want to look at it. I know that Louisiana wants to do this, and so they're willing to look into it, and I don't know if, and I'll help fund the study, and I'll, fund the study to be able to say, what would this do before we make any decision? I'm not asking to make one. The question is, let's do the study on it, and let's get a scientific peer review on it, and so that like we've done in the past.
General, absolutely, that would be a very good thing to do. And as Robert's saying, we think that would be part of the overall picture. This is not an either-or. What you mentioned is not by itself going to solve the problem, but could it be a big help to solve the problem? So getting the Corps to look at all these alternatives, those two are two of them that could be very helpful. But in the end, they've got to look at the management. That's why the Congress said, study the lower Mississippi comprehensive management. That's from Missouri South, because all of it's got to be looked at as a whole. And they keep telling us that, and they keep saying they don't have the ability to do that. That's not true. They have the discretion to do exactly what you just said, and I'm so glad to be working and collaborating with DMR on these scientific studies. It's been great, very helpful, but we can't do it. We can't make the Corps listen. Only they can open the door and say, okay, let's get in the room together and figure out win-win solutions. We believe that can happen.
So Keith Hurd, so we found 153 dead dolphins in Mississippi, 300 dead dolphins across the multi-state area. Is there any way to quantify how many sick dolphins there were that lived, that had lesions, and how it's going to affect their birth rates in the future? And how can we address that and make that part of the discussion?
That's an excellent question. I think that's what we're doing at the moment. We're studying these animals, like some of the slides that I showed you, that they're starving. You can start seeing still animals with lesions. These are long, and I do want to compliment General Spraggins. It's an extremely important thing because the death is finished. They're gone on this for the last 10 years since the BP oil spill. And again, our partnership with DMR and DEQ has really helped us focus on that particular issue. And using these animals as the indicator species, you're able to predict whatever else is going in the ecosystem. So thank you, Keith, for bringing this thing up.
Kenny Glavin, City of Biloxi, and I work with Linda with the Hotel and Lodging Association. And I know we're talking about the Mammal Protection Act, but it should be a Human Mammal Protection Act as well. You know, we have, just in Biloxi alone, we have 7,500 hotel rooms. And when the spillway was opened, it was a detriment to the hospitality industry. And I'm going to just throw out some figures on occupancy. We can get down to the nitty-gritty. We got data, firsthand data, of our occupancies dropping by 50, 60, 70%. What does that affect? Not just hotel revenues for owners, but it affects that housekeeper, and that it affects that waitress, and it affects a lot of jobs that we lost, or a lot of hours that we lost, and it ought to be a human rights issue here. But, you know, something has to be done. It's common sense. I know they're requiring, this is a requirement as we move forward, and I applaud the attorneys for pursuing it with the vigor that they are doing this with. But we have a monumental avalanche of data that shows that we are harmed. We are being harmed, and we wouldn't tolerate those waitresses and those minimum wage job earners' pockets, how it affects them. And that should be weighted in this equation. Thank you.
Councilman Glavin, and thanks to the city of Biloxi, Councilman Glavin has been a leader from the beginning, one of the first people to come after 2019 and say, we've got to do something about this. No one else is. And so now we're trying to collaborate. We are getting great cooperation from others. But what Councilman Glavin just said really is summarized so well. Our whole way of life is at risk here. And that's what we're talking about. We want to save the dolphins and save ourselves by doing so. There was another question here. Mayor.
Yeah, hi, Jimmy Rafferty, Mayor of Pasquotank. I'd like to add to what he was saying about how the economic impact has really hurt Pasquotank, because from the oysters not having them, we were pretty much ground zero. And we're hurting in 3 different areas. We have 3 of our seafood purveyors here. They're being hurt very bad right now because all they have, in essence, is shrimp and fish, no more oysters. Also, our restaurants are hurting. Also, right now, we have about 1/3 of our commercial fleet. We have empty spots in the harbor because, you know, formerly we had oyster fishermen there. So that's how we're economically being impacted by this as well.
Thank you, Mayor Rafferty. I mean, I think I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, Moby, but and Robert, but there's not been a wild-caught oyster harvest since 2019 because the salinity was so low for more than 30 days, it killed the natural reefs. And it takes a long time to come back from that. And let me just mention one other thing. We talk about the dolphins that died. That population, I'm told, Moby, correct him if I'm wrong, it takes about 30 years for the same numbers to come back because these are long-term mammals. These are mammals like humans. They bear 1, maybe 2 children every year or so, and it takes a long time to come back. And if the degrading is going on, it's even harder to have those new births. Yeah.
Exactly. He's going to take over my job pretty soon. A very, very profound, all the young people in this room, it's going to take a while for the population to come back. But one of the other things that I wanted to point out, I wanted to bring to General Spraggins' attention, In 2019, after the Bonnie Carey spillway, I was invited by the Trump White House to give a presentation. And one of the things, if COVID hadn't happened, they were going to be focused on it was, they said this is a $1 trillion issue. There are 31 states that are impacting Mississippi and Louisiana. They are putting all these nutrients in there, the wastes into the system. We are the dump. If somebody came to our state and said, we're going to put nuclear waste in and do you think we'll just sit there and say it's okay? Well, they're throwing everything back into here, and we're saying it's okay. And I really very much appreciate and support what Gerald and the Mississippi Sound Coalition are doing. But General Spraggins, we need to at least look at what's happening upstream as well, because there has been no really effort to see what those 31 states could be doing to reduce what they're putting in to make a difference. That could also be very helpful.
More questions?
We had that graphic where the two pollution points were up there.
Let's see, Jeff can do it. Maybe you can do it. Maybe Jeff can do it here. Here we go. Can you do it with this one right here? Yeah.
I didn't know it was that big of a deal.
This isn't working either.
While they're doing that,
I can see why you didn't do it.
Okay.
while they're doing that, I'm Allison Buchanan with the Focus Group. I'm Allison Buchanan. I'm with the Focus Group, and we have been engaged in the last month and a half to pull together a lot of the information and absorb ourselves in this whole issue. And we
No, yeah, next one. Yeah.
I wanted to point out something that Gerald pointed out to me, that it's like a David and Goliath situation. And we are up against some big forces, from the Corps of Engineers to big organizations in Louisiana that are on the other side, that are trying to do the opposite of what we're doing. And so what I wanted to say to this group, and anybody today, but we also now have social media. We will soon have a website that we need everybody to share and get everybody on board. But there are some large forces, and they might get into those more. So just wanted to.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Allison. And I know we've passed around a sign-in sheet. Anyone who would like to join our email list, we have a sign-in sheet. Should I give this back to you? Okay. So we have a sign-in sheet that's being passed around, and on our website, when it comes up, and on our Facebook page, there'll be a place where you can sign up for our email notices of activities and progress in this lawsuit and other things that are going on, as well as we will be publishing the scientific papers like the ones General Spraggins mentioned. There's a very powerful paper about the Mid-Breton sound diversion that is now available. It's a public document, and we'll be making it easy for you to get that. So please sign up to our email list if you haven't already, and those who are watching live stream, if you look at our Facebook and our website when it comes up, you'll be able to do that. There was another question over here. My Vietnam veteran friend here has a question. Go ahead. You got it?
No, I'm good. That's all.
Okay, you just wanted to see the slide. All right, good.
We'll have a printout for you all to take with you home.
Yes. Sarah Duffy Focus Group is working with Allison and all of us. They're a great team, communication. So when you leave here, there will be a handout of Moby's magnificent slide presentation. And we're going to have Moby on film so that our website will be able to show, this is, the scientific basis is there for the solutions that we're talking about. There are win-win solutions. And this Goliath over in Louisiana and the Corps of Engineers, what we really want is Goliath to put down their weapons and join with us to find solutions.
Oh, 1 second, Mayor Quave.
When you talk about studies, that usually has 5 or 10 years out, return on your money. An EIS can cost, back when we did one, it was $400,000. And 20 years after the study was done, we still don't have a project on that site. So what I'm saying is, General Spraggins has probably did every study known to mankind on that oyster reef out there. So why can't we just get a technical team together to go ahead and start the lawsuit immediately?
Actually, the Mississippi legislature gave us some money last spring that we're finally able to start using. And so in December, we led exactly the kind of study you're talking about, marrying thought with action, to look at the tipping points, the scientific and ultimately the engineering tipping points to how to manage this better and not wait for 5 years. That study, most of it will be done. This is Northern Gulf Institute, Mississippi State, University of Southern Mississippi, the ones that are doing a lot of General Spraggins studies. So you're right, Mayor. You've hit the nail on the head. For 50 years, we've been studying this. I mean, in 1973, there was a big Bonnie Carey spillway release that killed the oyster reefs almost as bad as this time. And ever since, people have been studying it to death. We need to marry the science with action. That's why the Full Coalition got formed. That's why we're taking the legal action. Is there another way to make it happen quicker? I must say honestly, although our delegation is 100% for us in D.C. and in the governor, lieutenant governor, and the legislation in Mississippi, we can't just do it alone. Their colleagues in the National Congress could solve this tomorrow by changing the law and compelling the Corps to look at these alternatives and find a win-win solution without having to go through all of this. Now, would more studies be needed there? Yeah, probably. For instance, there is some rumor that there's concern about whether the Morganza and the Old River control structure, and maybe others, are so old that if you use them and open them, it may be difficult to control closing them in a timely way. And in fact, the Congress has given the Corps some money to look at the Old River control structure, which they're doing now, about trying to help improve its, I mean, these are 100-year-old structures almost. So it's not just enough to have the studies on the books. We need the engineering as well to show how you can do these things better. But you're absolutely right. We're going to continue studies, but we're not going to wait for somebody to take action. We're taking action. We want our elected officials, who are very supportive in Mississippi, to get their colleagues to take action. And we think if Louisiana looks at the common interest we have, that they'll join us in a lot of these actions as well.
I know we have one friend in Louisiana, and you spoke to him, and I think we're going to have some action here pretty soon with the Speaker of the House and that gentleman and you, and we're going to get some answers, and I want to let everybody know you need to call your senators because we do have an election coming up. And let's tell them that they better get behind this and let's clear the Gulf up.
Yeah, just to be clear, Mayor, yeah, exactly what you're talking about, that's what we're doing, pulling everything together.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add this. A year ago, the Lieutenant Governor of Louisiana came to visit IMMS. And of course, he wanted to find out what was going on. He had heard only one side of the story. And he made a comment, and he made a comment back in the legislature in Louisiana. He said, I had to go to Mississippi to learn the truth. After he heard what we had to say, he's been here 4 or 5 times. He's very supportive because it affects both of us. We're not against Louisiana, or we have some common interests. And what Mayor Blessy was pointing out is that it's going to take congressional action in addition to, the public support and our legislative support to make things happen. But this is an existential threat. Please take it seriously. I've spent my lifetime on it. I think the General and I have worked on it for years and years. And I think this is time that we just can't say, okay, this is another issue. Because after the dolphins, as I was telling to Elaine, we're next.
Question? Yes, could you please restate? Microphone, let's see.
Yes, could you please restate what happened today and what is the significance of it? What happened earlier today?
Earlier today, our lead counsel, Robert Weigel, filed in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Mississippi here in Gulfport a lawsuit based on the Marine Mammal Protection Act to ask for declaratory and injunctive relief to compel the Corps of Engineers to go through the process that the Marine Mammal Protection Act has required them to do for years and they have neglected. And what is that process? Robert had explained it. I'm going to ask Robert to come back and give you the nutshell again. But that it's now a public record, and you can go online. We'll put a reference on our social media and so forth as to the number and all that. I mean, the press, I know, knows how to do that. But I'm going to ask Robert to give again, the nutshell of what our lawsuit we filed this morning will do if we're successful.
Go back, if you're an agency like the Corps, and figure out if there are ways that you can keep from doing that, right? Are there things you can do better? Are there things you can do differently? Like operate the Bonnie Carey spillway differently. Look at other methods of controlling floodwaters in the Mississippi, even if it's just a piece at a time. That's what that's all about. It's the most common sense thing in the world.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment more than a question. My name is Captain George Ricks. I'm former president of Save Louisiana Coalition. I came over in 2019 when I found out y'all had all the dead dolphins turning up on the beaches. And I personally documented 38 just in St. Bernard and Plaquemines waters. I wanted to tell you that our Lieutenant Governor, Billy Nungesser, is very much concerned about what's going on. I've been working closely with our Lieutenant Governor. We just did a video that's going to be released soon on the diversions. You know, General Spraggins talked about the two diversions north, but as I came over and said in 2019, y'all better be concerned about the Mid-Breton diversion, because as the crow flies, it's actually 10 miles closer than the spillway. And it will be operated every year. So, you know, we appreciate, personally, you guys filing suit. There are two suits that have been filed in Louisiana. Plaquemines Parish, the council has filed a lawsuit. Also, Mitch Jurasich has filed a lawsuit personally on behalf of the oystermen in Louisiana. So we appreciate what you guys are doing, and any way that Lieutenant Governor can help y'all, you know, I'm sure he will.
Thank you, George. We have talked with Billy Nungesser, Lieutenant Governor, and he's been very helpful, as Rusty mentioned. I can tell you that we're aware of and monitoring Ms. Jurasich's lawsuit. It's exactly the same problem we're talking about. And as far as the Mid-Breton is concerned, we are monitoring it. As you know, they're still in the process of preparing their draft EIS. We've made comments, and we're prepared to make more comments. We hope they'll see the light and decide that it's the way they're going about it is not a good idea. There's got to be a better way to have the Louisiana marsh restored, for instance. We keep talking about it, and dredging does work. In fact, CEPR has done dredging, and it works. Is it more costly? Perhaps. But if money is the only problem, let's put some of the United States of America's money and the BP oil spill money on solving the problem without killing the marine fisheries in Louisiana and Mississippi.
Thank you, everyone. Just after this, we actually have a Mississippi Sound Coalition meeting. You're all welcome to stay and participate. And if you have not, please fill out the sign-in sheet so that you can stay up to date on how these measures will move forward. Thank you so much.
I would like to say one thing. For the members of the press, if y'all leave, whenever you leave, we have a copy of our press release along with the slides. And then it has a link to a Dropbox folder that has that filed suit in it, along with images and everything else. But we have a copy of the press release and the slides for everyone in here as you leave.
Are there any final questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The press conference is adjourned, but we're going to go straight into a brief meeting of the coalition. But if, feel free to stay if you'd like. I want to call on Marlon Ladner, our chair. Marlon, if you'll kind of open up our meeting.
Thank you, Gerald. One thing in our society today, we throw around words and terms so much that they begin to lose their true meaning. Dr. Solangi stated about it being an existential threat. The sound is the loss of the sound is an existential threat to our culture, our way of life, our quality of life, and that, I think, was formed. Coalition has basically, I see it as these prongs have been in effect, and they're working at the same time. It's not 1, 2, and 3, but they're operating at the same time. So people who have lived here on this Gulf Coast, if we lose this sound, we lose our way of life. And that's how important it is. And the sound has made its effort to educate and try to protect this sound, because Jimmy mentioned oysters. We haven't had an oyster crop since 2019. Folks, that impacts us. Mr. Glavin mentioned the economic impact. Let me tell you, when we had that dead area out here a few years ago and had to close the beach, that not only impacted the casinos and the restaurants and all that, but it also impacted our tax base. We have tax bond commitments that are tied into the tourism industry. And if we lose that tourism industry, we're going to have a problem. So that is, I think, what the Sound Coalition is concerned about in an effort ultimately to save the sound. I don't have to tell people that live on the Gulf Coast how important the Mississippi Sound is. We were raised here, we know it. We shrimp, we crab, we did all that kind of. Couldn't eat meat on Friday. So guess what we had every Friday? We either had shrimp, mullet, flounders, crabs, oysters. Man, we had oyster po' boys all my life. So we all realize the importance of that, and I want to appreciate these gentlemen, Gerald as the chairman, Robert, our attorney, doing a tremendous job. And all we ask for, and if we could get other members, other political and other organizations to join us, I think it would be very helpful. So I'll turn it over now to Gerald. I think I spoke enough. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Marlon. And thanks to Harrison County Board of Supervisors. I see Dan Cuevas in the back, our new supervisor. Glad you're here, Dan. Thank you so much. Well, you've heard pretty much. The next thing on the agenda was an annual report of coalition activities, so I'm not going to go over all the stuff we've already said. Let me just mention that how appreciative we are from the members of our legislature, especially coastal legislators, Richard Bennett and Kevin Felsher, and Scott Delano and Mike Thompson, the senators, and Joel Carter. In fact, all of our delegation were very helpful, but the Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, the Governor, the AG, everybody really helped us get some appropriation from the legislature last year. And so we do have the Northern Gulf Institute under contract now as of December. Harrison County handles the money. Harrison County is the financial monitor of the money. The coalition is basically an advisory group. So we go through the regular legal procurement processes. We did competitive processes for these studies. And Mississippi State and USM, not surprisingly, succeeded in getting the scientific study, and Mississippi State's National Economic Research Group is doing the economic impact study, Kenny. That'll be ready this spring. And Brown and Mitchell is working on immediately looking at gauges, the additional gauges that apparently are going to be needed at the Wrigley's Pass and at the mouth of the Pearl River, both east and west. The legislature gave us a little money to at least study that, and perhaps if it looks like it's feasible, after consulting with General Spraggins Group and lots of others, whether or not that's needed. If it is needed, we'll be able to show what that data can do, real-time monitoring every day, both the quantity of the water and the pollution that's coming through the Wrigley's Pass. And so I'm just quickly giving you, we've been really busy getting these things in motion. Robert has already mentioned the status of our response in the Magnuson-Stevens case. February 13th is the deadline for the Corps and National Marine Fisheries to conclude that consultation and make their final report. Robert's already mentioned about the initial report that the Corps produced, which, if you read it, it's 100 and something pages, and it basically says we can't do anything about it, which we think is not correct, and that they had little impact on the Mississippi Sound, which we know from our own personal experience, our own eyes saw that's not correct. So that's pretty much, what we've been doing. We're going back to the legislature to ask for funding for the next fiscal year and beyond. We're going back to our delegation, and I want to say again, Senator Hyde-Smith, Senator Roger Wicker, Congressman Ezell, all four of our congressmen, Benny Thompson, Michael Guest, and General Kelly, all of these together, this is a nonpartisan, bipartisan, all hands on deck, Mississippians trying to solve this problem together. And we're working very closely together. We'll be going back to the Congress to see what else maybe they can do to nudge the Corps, Mayor Quave. Apparently the nudging so far hasn't worked, but we're going to be asking for not just a seat at the table. Our congressional delegation last summer together wrote a letter to the Corps and say the Mississippi Sound Coalition and its constituent members, D'Iberville, all the cities, the counties, the tourism, and the fisheries, Ryan Bradley's group, are essential stakeholders in that Lower Mississippi River study. We appreciate that, and so far the Corps has yet to contact us on that. It's almost a year, and we're waiting. We're ready and willing and waiting to participate and find win-win solutions. We'd rather not be adversaries. Robert, do you have anything else to add to our summary? Marlon, I think that's pretty much a summary. Let me throw the floor open to our members. Hold on. Hugh Keating.
Gerald, thank you guys so much for what you're doing. Excellent leadership. The Mississippi River Commission is comprised of members that do not include a representative from Mississippi, as I understand it. And I understand that there's still an effort ongoing at the congressional level to have that legislation amended so that we can include a representative. What's the status of that? Because you're talking about a seat at the table kind of thing. That's just another piece of the puzzle.
Great
perhaps.
question. Hugh Keating, Special Counsel for the City of Gulfport. Hugh, would you repeat? Hold on, John, just a second. Hugh, would you?
Make sure it's going.
Okay. Yeah. Would you repeat the question?
I would be happy to. There's an effort, and has been an effort, I understand, to get some federal legislation, amended federal legislation regarding the composition of the Mississippi River Commission. Since Mississippi does not have a representative as part of the membership of that commission, and what's the status of that, and how might that help to bring some different thought process to the Corps of Engineers' decision-making?
Thank you, Hugh. You're quite right. Mississippi itself does not have an appointment or a required Mississippi resident to be on the commission. Although some of the members may live in Mississippi, they're not appointed to represent Mississippi. So yes, actually, 4 years ago, Robert and I drafted the Mississippi Sound and Lake Pontchartrain Protection Act and have presented it to our delegation. It hasn't been introduced yet, but it does specifically ask not only for a quicker 2-year EIS, Mayor Quave, for the Bonnie Carey, but also to change the law and require a Mississippi appointment, or at least a Mississippi approved, but the president makes the appointments. An appointment that would be nominated by the governor of Mississippi to be on the Mississippi River Commission. That River Commission, it's kind of interesting as to, we still, well, without getting into the weeds, let me just say the Mississippi River Commission is basically dominated by the Corps of Engineers as a practical matter. And they do have let me just say, they have an enormously difficult, complex, challenging job to protect public health and safety and property from flooding. It's enormously complicated. We don't underestimate that. We do think, though, that if the Congress, through the Protection Act I'm talking about, or through other legislation, would compel the Corps to have two duties under the law, not just flood protection, which we all agree, nobody wants to flood New Orleans or Atchafalaya or anybody else, but also have the dual mission of protecting the marine environment of all the places that that river water reaches, whether it's naturally through the mouth or through diversions or whenever. They have never been tasked with doing that literally, although we think they have the capacity to do it, in common sense, like Robert says, to do it. So yes, the Congress could pass legislation, and we hope they will continue to take a closer look at our proposed Mississippi Sound and Lake Pontchartrain Protection Act, which obviously Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Bourne, St. Bernard Parish, I mean, you name it. Not to mention the others, Plaquemines, Mid-Barataria. It's an enormously complicated, mortally dangerous situation.
Yes, Mr. Blessed, thank y'all for all that y'all have been doing on all this and trying to fight these spillways. My question is, has anything being done to try to block this Mid-Breton spillway? I've been running charters, Chandelier charters, primarily for over 20 years. We also fish around Cat Island as well as the Louisiana Marsh, and it affected us a lot with this, with the 2019 primarily. But that Mid-Breton, I might as well sell my boat. It's just going to Chandeliers and nothing else. And there's several of us along this coast that fish primarily out there.
You are absolutely correct. We definitely know that as proposed today, it will be devastating to all the fisheries, certainly east of the Mississippi and maybe worse, certainly up into the Mississippi Sound. General Spraggins mentioned the study that USM released January of last year, which pretty much said the water really does come up from Mid-Breton through the Mid-Breton Chandelier Sound into Lake Bourne and Mississippi Sound, and you're going to have the low salinity forever. So it won't matter then if you open the Bonnie Carey again. So we are aware of that. They are in the process of seeking a permit from the Corps of Engineers to do it. They've got a lot of money. They've spent millions already on their design and so forth and their studies. I'm talking about CPRA, that's the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority over in Louisiana, which got $15-something billion of BP money. Now, they do a lot of good work. CPRA, let me just say, CPRA does a lot of good work. Mid-Breton is not one of them. And so we have made some comments to them about why we think you need to look at alternatives. You've got to find an alternative. Maybe dredging is this part of the solution. They need a way to save the Louisiana Marsh. We all agree with that. Let's put the best minds in the world together and find out how to do it without killing the very thing we think we're trying to save, which is our way of life in fisheries. What will we do about it? We are waiting when they file their draft EIS, we will comment on it. That's supposed to be sometime this year, maybe in August. I think their timeline, the last I looked at their master plan, is to file their final EIS request to get the permit to build it, that final would be in 2025. If they fail to recognize what we believe, and we're not prejudging it yet, we believe our current studies by the Northern Gulf Institute and our engineering studies and the additional work that General Spraggins and others will be doing We think if they ignore that and go forward anyway, then we will have no choice but to ask for two solutions. One will be filing an NEPA against that permit. But better than that is by that time, we hope that our national Congress will have seen enough to see the light that the evidence, the science, the engineering points to not allowing that Mid-Breton to go forward. Now, to some degree, I want to say that we're still open. If we're wrong about the science and engineering, somebody show us where we're wrong. So far, they haven't done that.
Gerald, first off, thanks to all of y'all for all that y'all have done, and the board of supervisors for helping fund it, and the cities that have participated. I hope everybody will continue, because it takes money to fight these Goliaths. The question that came to mind a little while ago when somebody mentioned the 31 states. Is there anything that we can do to address those 31 states? Because really, it's not just the salinity problem, it's the nutrient problem, the pesticides, the fertilizers, the sewage, that unfortunately, as it flows down the Mississippi River, just starts up at the Illinois and flows all the way down to Mississippi at every city and everything that flows in between. I'm not sure if that's not a taking, if they're dumping in the Mississippi Sound, that they're taking our property down here. I was thinking in terms of an eminent domain type situation, so that those states get involved, because it seems to me that one of the problems you're going to have to deal with is stopping the flow before it gets into the river. Detention ponds, something that keeps the nutrients where they should be and not going into the river. But I just a thought when you start talking about the 31 states, we don't hear from them, but we're not involving them either. And so I'm not sure doing something along the lines of getting them all involved. I'm sure they would be mad, but at some point in time, they can't keep just dumping down and not suffer a consequence for it.
Tim Holloman, attorney for the Harris County Board of Supervisors, and you have just summarized the biggest problem of all, but there are solutions. The answer is we haven't tried to tackle that yet. It's on our radar screen to try to work with coalitions. There are many coalitions up and down the river. And there's a group studying the dead zone that's been doing that for a long time, that's composed of a lot of those states. We have begun discussions suggesting to our delegation, who remember they can't do it alone. You know, there's 100 senators and 435 congressmen. So the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which was recently done for the Great Lakes a few years ago, the Congress passed it, giving them $3 million. All of those states and cities and counties involved, they're having the same problem. The nutrients and the phosphates and the nitrates killing life and destroying other life in the Great Lakes. We think that kind of massive initiative for the 31 states, sooner or later, hopefully sooner, has to be done, and only the National Congress, I think, can do that. In theory, you could do a 31-state compact. We're not saying it can't be done, but really, that's a long time-consuming process. So yes, and there are ways to do it. The Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is showing, and actually, the Agriculture Department's got some experiments on ways to. Says, look, it's the breadbasket of America. We certainly don't want to harm agriculture. No, of course not. What's the win-win? The win-win is let's figure ways to control that runoff. The Clean Water Act, you know, in the 70s, early 70s, when it was passed, requires all municipalities and counties to come up to the new standard. And it's taken a while, and we're there now with tertiary treatment of our municipal sewage. But agriculture was exempted from the Clean Water Act. We think, to be fair and helpful to agriculture, Congress needs to see at a way of doing something similar for agriculture. 90% of in the beginning, 90% of the treatment plants that we now have in Harrison County Utility Authority and along the coast was paid with federal money. Now, the 10% was pretty hard to raise, but it's still mainly federal money. And after Katrina, we had some 100% money. This is as bad as a hurricane, it's just slower moving. So I'm suggesting 100% federal money to do exactly what you're talking about. We have some great minds. We have great scientists at EPA and National Marine Fisheries and at the Corps of Engineers. Let's find a way to do what you're talking about. It can be done. If we don't start now, we'll run out of time. The phosphates and the phosphorus, especially, and the nitrates, are what feed that algae. And I'm getting in the weeds a little bit here, but look at what's happening in some of the Florida coastal cities where they have canals, and they have the same kind of toxic algae bloom we're talking about every year. We can't survive that. Robert, you had something to add.
No, Gerald, I was just going to say what you said. Right now, we've got a set of laws that do not address the majority of the pollution that we get in the Mississippi River. So to get a really effective solution, Tim, we're going to have some kind of legislation. That's it.
Any other questions or comments? Or there's one over here.
Yeah, this is Susan Putnam. I'm with Pass Christian. Have we gotten the universities involved? Perhaps getting the different states, all these universities throughout these states could be of great help. So.
We're trying, and let me just say, as of today, Mississippi State and Southern and the Marine Science Department for Southern Gulf Coast Research Lab, Mississippi State's Northern Gulf Institute, yes, they're all on board assisting us. We are also, we'll have more about this soon, but Dr. Paul Mickle, who's the head of the Northern Gulf Institute, it's at Stennis, that's working on our contract right now, the science contract, is planning a fairly comprehensive meeting, probably in March, of the scientists in Mississippi who either working on this or we'd like to see them working on this. And that'll be a public meeting. We'll have an announcement about that. Louisiana has some great scientists too. Most of them, I wouldn't say most of them, many of them are working for CEPR in the state. What we're looking for is peer-reviewed science. So if it's peer-reviewed and it's really well done, it won't matter what institution is doing it. Tulane has some great people. LSU has some great people. There are others. And there's others in the country. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but yeah, our mission as a coalition, if you look at it, it ends with creating good public policy based on good science and good engineering. Good science, like beauty, is sometimes in the eyes of the beholder, except other scientists, peer-reviewed scientists. That's why we do peer review. This is not prejudged. We've got to have peer-reviewed science, and we've got a great deal of it on our side right now.
Sure, I've got one more statement. When this lawsuit was heard, the Corps denied having anything to do with well, they know they released the water, but that water didn't hurt the environment. Did we think we were going to get any other decision? I mean, this started with Bill Clinton, and now the present-day president and his staff is denying everything. They're not responsible for anything that's going on in this country. So I don't see any way we can get around it. Not right now.
Well, we think good science, good engineering will eventually prevail among all policymakers of goodwill. We think that will work. It is a public education challenge. It's not an overnight understanding. So ultimately, I mean, we're a great democracy. You, the people, the voters, the taxpayers, your communications with your elected representatives, I still have faith will make the difference in the long run. Moby, you had something else you were going to say?
just wanted to add something that was brought about Mid-Britain. Even though they have a waiver from Congress to kill the dolphins, but one thing they didn't understand was that these dolphins do not recognize that artificial line that separates Mississippi and Louisiana. And the Mississippi Sound Coalition, with the two great minds we have up here, are focused on that because the waiver does not grant them that privilege, because these animals, like all of you who have been out in the Sound, every day go past Cat Island and come back. So basically,
Go ahead, finish up, I was gonna, go ahead.
basically that is something that we can, and also the Central Fish Habitat, the nursery of Mississippi Sound that produces, and if the species go to the other side of the islands, could be killed. So those are issues that I think our lawyers will take care of it.
Thank you, Moby. I want to recognize Congressman Ezell. Mike Ezell just come. Mike, would you like to say something? You've been a great asset to us. Why don't you come forward and where we have a microphone here. We're so delighted. I want to praise our congressman one more time. Last summer, he had the Corps in a hearing, and I'll let him tell you more about it, but he actually had them have to say on the record that they're going to give this coalition recognition as key stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, I just had a few minutes, and I wanted to come by to try to put my 2 cents worth in. You know, we got to protect this Gulf, and I'm going to continue to fight for that as long as I'm in office. So just know that, yeah, I did put them on the hot seat, and I got them to commit to making sure they kept us involved in this study in the lower Mississippi. So just know that you got to, there's my buddy right there. Anyhow, just know that we're fighting, we're standing, you know, for what's right, and we're not going to turn it loose. So thank you all very much. Yes, sir.
If you help Mississippi get on a committee they should be on that's being ignored by the rest of the state?
He's talking about the Mississippi River Commission.
Yeah, if I can, if there's a way that I can do that, I would be more than glad to do that. If you can just kind of coordinate through our office, we'll do what we can. Because, you know, we cannot turn this loose because, you know, nobody cares about us like us, and we got to make sure we take care of each other. So I'm committed to it, and I'm going to hold them accountable for it. And so thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We're so delighted to have your leadership in this matter. And I can tell you, to my good Vietnam veteran friend, his staff is looking at the very thing you just asked about. So any other questions or observations? We appreciate it. We've been here now about an hour and a half. If you have anything after we adjourn, we'll be glad to stick around and answer further questions one-on-one. So thanks so much, everybody, for being with us. Thank you.